Opinions expressed on this radio program do not necessarily reflect the views of this radio station.
My friends and I always tune into the Todd L. Levitt Law Show. Todd is entertaining, informative, and always delivers the goods.
Todd might not tell you what you want to hear, but he's going to tell you what you need to hear. And all you got to do is listen.
Hold on, Todd. Don't let go. It's time for the Todd L. Levitt Law Show.
I met her in a club down in Old Soho, where you drink champagne and it tastes like Coca-Cola, C-O-L-A Cola. She walked up to me and she asked me to dance. I asked her her name and in a dark brown voice she said Lola, L-O-L-A Lola, la 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 Lola. Well, I'm not the world's most physical guy, but when she squeezed me tight she nearly broke my spine. Oh my Lola, la 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 Lola. Well, I'm not dumb, but I can't understand why she walked like a woman but talked like a man. Oh my Lola, la 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 Lola, la 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 Lola.
Welcome to the Todd L. Levitt Law Show. Good morning, good evening, and good night. I'm not Todd L. Levitt. I'm Craig. Todd is paddling somewhere in the UP. He called me a little bit ago earlier this morning and said, I'm nowhere near anything. I don't have a phone. I don't have Wi-Fi. I'm paddling through parts of the UP. He said, call my good friend, the King, Steve Lehto, and see if he'll be on the show. And so that's what I did. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, Steve Lehto is here. Hey!
And he did not call me soon enough because I've got a canoe with a 5-horsepower outboard motor. I could have cruised along and picked him up or taken him for a tow.
See, if he really would have thought this out. Now, where do you think he's paddling at that he doesn't have any kind of a connection at all in the UP?
The Tequamanon River is a good bet.
Okay.
Perhaps out on Lake Superior, Whitefish Bay, maybe.
Yeah, you never know.
Of course, got to be careful this time of year. That lake eats boats. So,
well,
be careful.
If Todd isn't back next week, you'll know why. No, Todd will be back next week. But anyway, Todd was out. He wanted to go out and do some paddling, and so we've got Steve Lehto from Lehto's Law here to talk all about Lehto's Law and about lemon law and about warranty things going on and about YouTube and about a new Viper and everything else. Of course, the Todd L. Levitt Law Show, we come to you every Sunday morning from 8 to 9 on 98.5 UPS, and we podcast all over God's green earth. You can get us on iTunes. You can get us on SoundCloud. You can get us on TuneIn. You can get us on Apple Podcasts. Anywhere else, anywhere you get your podcasts, you can get the Todd L. Levitt Law Show on podcast. I do have to mention before we get started, Todd did have a complaint. That's a hallmark of the Todd L. Levitt Law Show. He has a complaint, and his complaint was, and he made me scribble this down. Let me see if I can actually read my writing here. He says he's been watching a lot of TV lately, and he sees all these exercise commercials for these exercise bikes, like these Pelotons and stuff. Like, have you seen those before? Those things?
I'm looking at a Peloton right now. I've got one in my office.
Okay, so there you go. He says his complaint is whenever you see these commercials for these Pelotons and stuff like that, or these Mirror is the new one where you actually are talking to a mirror that's got a video display and stuff. All these people who are doing the exercising are all super young and super fit and super good looking. He said, if they were all looked like him and me and you and looked like, regular normal people who are fat and not super hot and super good looking, they'd sell more of those bikes.
No, the thinking is you buy the bike, you look like the person in the commercial.
Exactly.
It's the same thought process as the people who did the beer commercials with girls in bikinis running around.
Right.
The thinking is that if I drink that beer, I'm either going to get to look like her or get to date her, depending on which gender you are.
and the bike ones are you're going to end up looking. This is what you're going to end up looking like.
Yeah.
But I don't think it would. And now maybe if they had one commercial where it started off with somebody who looked like me, who was all tubby and everything, and then by the end of the commercial they looked like all hot, like some young hot guy or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that would be it. But I don't know. I think you're onto something. You obviously did you study a little advertising in college? A little marketing?
I've read some on it, yeah, a little bit.
Sure, exactly.
Yeah, I also discovered in life that ain't nobody can promote you like you can promote you. So you've got to become your own one-person advertising PR campaign.
That's exactly correct. You know your brand better than anybody else, no matter what your brand is.
Exactly.
But anyway, so yeah, I think Todd. I think they're being in radio. They always tell you want to program to the audience you want, not that the audience you have. Same thing. You want to program to the people what they want to be. If they didn't want to see the hot person and didn't want to think that that's what they could end up being, then that's what they wouldn't be they wouldn't be trying to sell to. So
yes.
So that was Todd's complaint. If you've got a complaint you want to tell Todd or you want to rebuttal to Todd's complaint, toddlevittlawshow@gmail.com is how you can get a hold of us anytime to ask questions or whatever. toddlevittlawshow@gmail.com. The guy who you're hearing talking is Steve Lehto from Lehto's Law. You see him on YouTube. He's got his own podcast. He's got a website. Tell people if they're, you haven't been on it a little bit, Steve. If anybody who doesn't know who Steve Lehto is, tell us a little bit about you.
Well, I've been practicing lemon law in the state of Michigan now for 29 years.
Wow.
I just crossed the 29th anniversary about 2 weeks ago. And I do nothing but lemon law. I've been doing it for 29 years. I also taught law school for 10 years. But I, for a long time, worked in radio. I was a disc jockey before I went to law school. And then I started doing a lot of talk radio afterwards. And then I transitioned over into podcasting and videos. So if you want to know more about me, go to Google and type in Steve Lehto, Lehto, and hit enter. You'll get sick of me real fast. But that's one of the good things about having a slightly unusual last name, because Lehto, Lehto, is a Finnish word. It's not as common in America as it is in Finland. But you'll get a lot of stuff. But yeah, I've got a channel on YouTube with 145,000 subscribers. And I talk about the law. I talk a lot about cars. I love cars. And my specialty being lemon law, which is, defective brand new cars. I represent a lot of people with defective cars, but it gives me an excuse to talk about cars at work. So, it's a great work if you can get it.
Now, I know I've probably asked you this before, so out of 145,000 subscribers on YouTube, are you real popular in like Finland and Norway in that area?
Believe it or not, my number one audience is America. My number two audience is Canada. Okay. And then I've got listeners in Australia and Finland. And and I do live streams on Sunday afternoons. Okay. And a lot of people who check into the live stream to talk to me, I notice their names and their Finnish names. And these people all speak great English because in Finland, most people are at least bilingual. And many of them say that they go on the internet, go to YouTube, and when they spot a Finnish word or name, they look at it. And many of them find it interesting that there's a guy with a Finnish name who's popular in America. But the sad part is I don't speak a word of Finnish.
Well, because you might be Finnish, but you're from here.
Yes. My family's from the Upper Peninsula, and in the western end, there's a little peninsula that sticks into Lake Superior called the Keweenaw Peninsula, the Copper Country.
Right.
And my family's from there, and there's a huge Finnish community up there. So I've got a whole Finnish background, but my parents didn't teach any of us to speak Finnish.
And that in that area of the UP is heavily Norwegian Finnish. There's a lot of that influence there.
Yes,
And you have written books about that part of the world as well, correct?
Yeah. In fact, I wrote a book about the Italian Hall disaster, which took place in Calumet in 1913, where somebody yelled fire in a crowded theater and 73 people died. There was no fire. The book is called Death's Door. And then I also wrote a book about Douglas Houghton, who is the first surveyor and geologist of Michigan. And in 1837 to 1845, he explored the entire state. And so wherever Todd's paddling right now, Douglas Houghton paddled in like 1840. So he could be on the Big Two-Hearted River. He could be on the Montreal River. He could be, on the river Duluth. Any of those places. So wherever Todd is, Douglas Houghton was a couple hundred years ago.
And Douglas Houghton got around just fine without Wi-Fi. Come on, Todd.
Yeah,
Come on.
Although he had people who paddled for him, so I think that helped.
Okay. Well, that probably is it too. All right. So Steve Lehto is filling in for Todd today. Todd is paddling through the UP. We are going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we've got lots to talk about, including your new Viper and about all these auto warranties that are out these days. And we'll talk about some lemon law. We'll talk more about your YouTube channel and some of the topics you touch on there and more, and maybe even get to a little bit of law as well. It's the Todd L. Levitt Law Show. We'll be right back.
I met her in a club down in Old Soho, where you drink champagne and it tastes like Coca-Cola, C-O-L-A Cola. She walked up to me and she asked me to dance. I asked her her name and in a dark brown voice she said Lola, L-O-L-A Lola, la 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 Lola. Well, I'm not the world's most physical guy, but when she squeezed me tight she nearly broke my spine. Oh my Lola, la 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 Lola. But I'm not dumb, but I can't understand why she walked like a woman and talked like a man. Oh my Lola, la 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 Lola, la 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 Lola.
Welcome back to the Todd L. Levitt Law Show, podcasting and broadcasting all across the Mitten State and all across America and all across the world. You can hear this podcast in over 30 different countries. We're in Australia, we're in Canada, we're in China, of all places. And plus, you can hear us in all 50 states and on 88.5 UPS. It's the Todd L. Levitt Law Show. I'm Craig Russell, Todd's producer and co-host. Todd is off paddling through someplace in the UP. We haven't decided exactly where it is going to be yet. Maybe he's at Whitefish Point. He might just be in a river somewhere. He could also just be at a restaurant. We have no idea. But Todd called me up this morning and said, get Steve Lehto, the king, to fill in for me. So Steve Lehto is here from Lehto's Law on YouTube and many other places. Hello, Steve Lehto.
It's good to be here.
I'm glad you're here. We have not had you on much this year.
It's been a while. Yeah, it has.
It has. How have things been going for you?
Things have been going good. In fact, I moved to a new location. I've got a new. I've actually bought a new house, and I actually have a new recording studio.
Yes, I've noticed that because I actually subscribe to you on YouTube, so I see your videos. I see, the 7 or 8 videos a day you put out, and I'm like, and I often think to myself, how do you work? How you've got all this time to put these videos out?
It's called low quality production on the videos. The videos don't take that much time.
No, they really don't. No,
yeah, I crank out 2 videos a day, and I just made that part of my life. I get up early, I shoot 2 videos, and I go to work.
There you go.
But I moved to a new location, so I've got a new studio, and I also picked up a new car along the way. We can talk about that later. But I know that when I talked to Todd earlier, and Todd said, Steve, one thing, he goes, do you know anything about these phone calls that deluge us? Do you know anything about them? I go, yes, I've shot videos on this. This is a pet peeve of mine. He goes, dude, it's a pet peeve of mine. And what Todd's talking about is junk phone calls.
Okay.
And there are companies out there, many of them are based in other countries. Some of them are based in the U.S., but they basically tap into the U.S. phone system. They have auto dialers that just sit there and dial numbers all day long, 001, 002, 00. And if it rings, it rings. Here's the problem. They can mask the phone number. So when you look at the caller ID, it'll look like a local number.
Yep.
You pick it up, and it's a recording. It could be, hi, this is Rachel from Card Services. I can lower your credit card for you.
Yep.
Hi, this is your advocate for Medicare. We can help you get a knee brace or back brace from the government. Hi, the warranty on your car is expired. It's time for you to renew. And they've got like 10 of these different things. They're all scams. And what they're doing is they're bombarding Americans with phone calls. And here's the thing. It's against the law. It's a federal offense. But because these people are all operating out of offshore call centers, and the way they're doing this, the only people who could stop this is the phone companies. But the phone companies don't want to stop it because they make money off the phone calls.
Sure.
And they lobby in Washington to keep the FCC from doing anything about this. This is one of the number one things people complain about to the FCC, to the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, and to their Congress people. And I urge people that if you ever get the chance during this election season, if someone's standing on your porch going, please vote for me, grab them by the collar and say, make the junk phone calls stop and I'll vote for you for life.
And now the thing about it is, yes, they are very annoying. And it's possible because, I mean, I'll be honest with you, not only, I don't get a lot of them on my personal phone because, you know, it's 2020. If I don't know who's calling me, if there is a name doesn't pop up on caller ID, or if I don't know if it's not a contact, I'm not answering it. Come on. You know, what is this, 1994? I mean, geez.
I have a desk phone. I have to because I'm an attorney.
Yes,
so
you have a business.
Phone.
Yep.
And my desk phone rings, I'd guess, between 5 and 10 times a day. I look at the caller ID. It's a local number.
Sure.
I pick it up. Hi, this is Rachel from Card Services.
Yep.
And so I'll ring through. They'll say, you know, press 1 to speak to an operator. I press 1 and I tell them what I think of them.
Yeah,
I get them to hang up on me.
Exactly. Well, and so that's what I'm saying. Personally, I don't get a lot of them, but even at the radio station, the request line, we'll get a call on the request line, and we don't have caller ID on the request line. So you then get somebody calling, you know, wanting to hear the latest Justin Bieber song or whatever.
Right.
And you answer it, and it's, you know, your Google listing has expired. Your
that's
business is not, you know, the Google, the Google business one. Now, I've got to believe that the majority of people can see right through this. They hear that and they immediately go, this is crap. And they either press, you know, 7 a bunch of times to get them to take them off the list, or 9 or they hang up.
They won't take you off the list. That's the problem. They'll call again tomorrow. And what they're doing, it's the law of large numbers. They're ringing 1 million phones an hour. And if 1 out of 1 million buys something, to them it's a profit.
Yep.
It's crazy. And there's a do not call list. I've got all my numbers on the do not call list. They keep calling because the Federal Communications Commission, the FCC that oversees this, can't stop them because they're all in the Philippines, they're in India, they're in China, they're in other countries. And whenever you hear about this, once in a while they'll crack down on some phone company that knows that this is what people are using their numbers for, but they don't care because they're making money. Once in a while, you hear about them cracking down on one operator, and all they do is they shift to another company, and they start doing it all over again.
Well, now my question is, so when they actually, these companies, are they actually, they're scams, obviously, but are they like real legitimate scams, or can you actually buy a product from them?
No, many of them are outright scams. So when Rachel from Card Services calls you and says, hi, I can reduce your credit card, interest rate. Would you like us to do that? You say yes. You press 1. A guy will come on who's reading off a script, whose English is horrible, but he'll say, how many credit cards do you have? And you say, I got 3. Okay, what are they? You go, MasterCard. You go, what's the number? You give them the number. You go, what's the expiration date? You tell them. What's the code in the back? You tell them. What's your name? You tell them. And while he's talking to you, he gives the information to somebody, and they start ordering stuff off of Amazon from you. And they make you pay for it. And so it's a total scam. And so some of the stuff, it's very transparent like that anybody can figure that out. But it must be working because they keep coming. These phone calls keep happening.
And my guess is the majority of this, and it's not to be derogatory or stereotypical, but I'm assuming that most of it is older Americans who aren't as savvy about this kind of stuff, who don't necessarily read stories on the internet about how these scams work, or hear podcasts. If it isn't Lester Holt in the NBC Nightly News talking about it, my 75-year-old mother isn't going to know. And so if somebody calls her up and says, hey, I can reduce your credit card debt, she's falling for it.
That's a serious problem. And here's the other one. They'll often call with a masked number that says that they're calling from the government. So you will look down at your caller ID, and it'll go area code 202, which is Washington, D.C., and it'll say the Internal Revenue Service.
Yep.
You pick it up, and a guy will say, hi, this is Officer Johnson. I'm calling from the IRS. Your tax return had a fraudulent thing on it, and if you don't pay us money within 24 hours, you'll be arrested.
Yeah.
And there are people out there, when they get that phone call and they look at the caller ID, which they trust, they actually think, I'm going to get arrested. The IRS never calls you. They write to you. They will not call you. But unfortunately, people are taken off guard because they got called at home and they trust their caller ID.
And they trust that if somebody's calling them with these accusations, that it must be true.
Yes.
I mean, I look at it, I'm one of those kind of people. If you ask me right now how much money I have in my checking account, I know to the dime how much I've got. I keep track of that kind of stuff. Yes. I'll know if somebody called me up and said, there's a fraudulent thing on your tax return and you owe $455, I'd be like, no, there isn't. Because you know what? You've had my tax return now for 9 months and you haven't done anything about it to this point. I doubt that's true. You know what I mean?
They're doing this. They're auto-dialing thousands and thousands and thousands of people, and 1 out of 100 picks up, and out of 100 who pick up, 10 they keep on the line, and if one person falls for it, they get some money.
Yep, and it just keeps them going. It's like it is like the making an eagle on the golf course. So you're a golfer at all, Steve? Have you golfed before?
3 rounds in my entire life.
Okay. So basically what it is the first time you're ever on a golf course and you make an eagle, like a really incredible shot, it keeps you coming back. You go, that was easy. I can do that all.
You go fishing the first time a big fish jumps in the boat.
Yep, you're hooked. Literally, you're hooked.
Yes.
It's the same thing. They get 1 or 2 people, even if they call and how much does it cost them to call 1 million numbers a day? Zero.
Exactly.
Pennies, if that. And so even if they only, the overhead is so low, even if they only get 1 or 2 people to fall for the scam, they're well ahead.
Right.
It's crazy. You gotta be diligent. You gotta watch that kind of stuff.
And I tell people, here's the problem: the government's not going to stop these people. And if they get your money, you're not getting it back.
Yeah.
The only solution here, short of actually getting the phone companies to stop allowing this to happen, is simply education. Telling people that these things happen. I tell people, if someone calls you at home and you weren't expecting the phone call and you're taken off guard, go, what's your number? I'm going to call you back. And many scam artists will hang up on you or say, I can't, you can't call me back. And I hate to say this, I have very close relatives who've called me and said, Steve, I just got a phone call from the IRS. And I go, no, you didn't.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, I did. I'm like, no, you didn't.
No, you didn't. Not at all. But you know what, though? But my mom has fallen for the old person scam of, my son is calling from New Jersey and he's in jail and needs $800 to get out of jail. She turns around and calls me and goes, where is your son at? And I'll be like, he's sitting right next to me. She goes, so he's not in New Jersey? I go, no, he's not. I mean, but unfortunately, there's the other part too. And like I said in the very beginning, this is 2020. If I don't know who's calling me, if I don't know the number, or if I don't have a contact for that person, or I don't have caller ID, what? If it's important, they'll leave a message. And 99.9% of the time, they never leave a message because they're never going to do that.
Yep.
That's the easiest way to solve that problem. Get it. Every phone has got a caller ID on it nowadays.
Yes.
If you don't know the number, don't answer it. If it's a message and it's something important, they'll leave a message and you can call them right back. And then you'll know it's legit. So just be diligent and be careful. And make sure you subscribe to Steve Lehto on YouTube because you'll get this kind of information along with lots of other important things, right?
Yeah, you want to see a lawyer rant? I rant, and this is one of the things I rant about. I've done a couple videos on this one. It's a hot topic for me.
I'm sure you have. Hey, we got to take a break, but when we come back, we'll talk more about your YouTube channel because you just celebrated a milestone. Steve Lehto is filling in for Todd Levitt. It's the Todd L. Levitt Law Show. We'll be right back.
I met her in a club down in Old Soho where you drink champagne and it tastes like Coca-Cola. C-O-L-A Cola. She walked up to me and she asked me to dance. I asked her her name and in a dark brown voice she said Lola. L-O-L-A Lola. La 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 Lola. Well, I'm not the world's most physical guy, but she squeezed me tight, she nearly broke my spine. Oh my Lola.
Welcome back to the Todd L. Levitt Law Show, podcasting and broadcasting from the middle of the mitten, except not with Todd today. Todd is somewhere in the UP, floating around in a canoe. He decided he wanted to paddle. He didn't have any Wi-Fi, so he was able to, with a tin can and some string and a couple of cans, get a hold of me and get a hold of Steve Lehto to guest host the show. So Lehto's Law, Steve Lehto is here in the house.
It was a carrier pigeon that got me the message.
Well, okay. Well, I'm glad he has gotten a little technologically advanced. With me it was 2 tin cans and a piece of string. But
there you go.
Todd should be back next week. If he's not, well, then we'll have something else to worry about.
We'll send out a search party.
Yes, maybe that pigeon that he sent you the message with, you could send it back to try and find him. Steve Lehto is here, and Steve, if you don't know what Steve's all about, Steve does lemon law in the state of Michigan. He's been a lawyer for nearly 30 years. He also has a wildly successful YouTube channel called Lehto's Law that has 145,000 subscribers, and you just celebrated a milestone earlier this week. Did you not?
Actually, I just entered my 7th season. I actually, at the end of each year, not the calendar year, but after I put up 365 or 66 days of videos, I just start a new season and start numbering them over because otherwise it gets unwieldy. And just entered season 7. But a week or two ago, I just got the plaque from YouTube saying, congratulations on 100,000 subscribers, which I crossed in November of last year.
Well,
so apparently COVID's kind of tied things up a little bit.
They're busy there at the YouTube. They've got some stuff going on with the YouTube and everything like that.
Yeah.
Congratulations on all those many subscribers and everything. And I was going to ask you, how do you figure your seasons? Because if you're a TV watcher, we're on season 28 of Dancing with the Stars, and I'm telling you that show has not been on since I was in high school. It's
I wouldn't know, but I do know. I know some shows like Survivor go 2 seasons a year or so.
They do it whatever the string of episodes are. Usually it's a fall season and a spring season. So I was going to ask you, what do you consider a season? And you obviously
it's a year. It's just 1 year from when I started.
Right. So 7 years ago this past week, you started doing these YouTube videos. Did you have any idea it was going to turn out the way it was going to turn out?
No. And in fact, I was doing podcasting audio only, talking into a microphone and recording the audio and uploading it to iTunes. And I had, a couple thousand subscribers maybe. And a friend of mine said, Steve, you should videotape those and put them on YouTube. And I go, why? And he goes, because YouTube is huge. And I go, who wants to watch a guy talk?
You'd be amazed.
Shows how well in touch I was with where this was going. And he goes, Steve, you'd be surprised. People go on YouTube and look for information. And I did some research, and I discovered that, that the number 1 search engine on the internet's Google. The number 2 search engine is YouTube.
Yeah.
People go to YouTube looking for answers. He goes, if someone's looking for an answer to a legal question, they go to YouTube. I'm like, what? Who does that? And then I realized, oh, wait, not everyone thinks like I do. So I started videotaping myself shooting my podcasts, and it turns out that people started subscribing. And I discovered that the more of them I put up, the more people subscribe. So it became a vicious cycle.
And on top of it, you started to find out that more people were willing to watch you do these videos than to listen to just the audio part of it.
Yeah. In fact, I've got probably 10 times the viewers a day as I had listeners on my podcast. I still put the podcast up, and I have people tell me, they said, Steve, I subscribe to your podcast. I listen to you as I commute. And that's great. I'm glad. But once in a while, I'm talking about something, and I'll mention something, visual that people can't hear, and they're like, "What are you talking about?"
Well, here's what you hope. You hope while people are commuting, they're listening to the podcast and not watching the videos, because that would be a little dangerous.
Yes,
I'm just gonna say that.
Yeah.
Hey, we found out on some of the couple of the videos that you were talking about on your YouTube channel that you purchased a new car over the summer, and it's something you're very proud of.
Well, yeah, I actually got myself a Viper, a Dodge Viper. And here's the thing. I've been talking about cars and writing about cars. I used to write for roadtrack.com and Jalopnik. And I owned a 1969 Dodge Charger when I was in high school, similar to the General Lee, but mine was bright yellow. And, so I've always liked cars, but lately, I as an attorney, I've had, Ford Explorers and stuff. So
sure.
Nothing that exciting.
Sure.
And I told myself, if I ever get myself in a position to get a nice car, an extra car, I'd like to get a Dodge Viper. And so a friend of mine is a car broker, and I mentioned to him late last fall, earlier this winter, I said, I'm thinking about getting a Viper, but I like the older ones, the 1996 through 2002, which is the second generation Vipers. And he said, well, let me know when you want to pull the trigger. I'll find you one. So it's a used car, obviously. And I called him up one day and said, Mark, I've got the money. Find me one. He called me back a couple hours later. He goes, Steve, I found you a 1999 Dodge Viper, 4,500 miles on the clock. The original owner, it's still got the original tires on it. It's bright red. It's exactly what you're looking for. I took one look at it and I said, how fast can we get it here? So had it shipped over in a trailer, and it's in my garage right now, and that car is a blast to drive.
Explain to non-car people like myself, what is so special about this Dodge Viper?
Well, back in about 1989 or 88, Chrysler, Bob Lutz was there, a guy who's a real car guy. And Chrysler was trying to think of what they could do to shake up their image and make it a little more, racy in terms of sports cars as opposed to like minivans. And Carroll Shelby, the guy who they just made the movie, Ford versus Ferrari about, Carroll Shelby was still around. And so they said, hey, Carroll, if you were to help Chrysler build a supercar, what would you do? And so they all sat down and they came up with the idea for this supercar that they're going to call the Viper. And it's got a V10 aluminum block 8-liter engine that puts out 500 horsepower, maybe.
Wow.
Running into a 6-speed transmission. And all it is just a monster hot rod. It's got gigantic rear tires. It'll do 60 miles an hour in first gear. It'll go 0 to 60 in like 3 seconds. It's insanely fast. It handles really, really well. And so it was one of these things where they built the car as a show car and brought it to the North American International Auto Show at Cobo Hall. And somebody asked Bob Lutz on camera, hey, Bob, you guys bring these show cars every year. How come you don't sell them to the public? And Bob Lutz said, if people would buy it, we'd sell it. And somebody goes, I think I'd buy that car. So they decided to build them and see what happened. So they built them, and people bought them. And so, they built them all the way through, I think, 2017 or 2018 was around the last time they sold them. They stopped making them finally. But the one I've got, like I said, 1999, no airbags, no anti-lock brakes, none of that stuff.
No.
It's just a hot rod.
It's just an engine and 4 tires and you.
Yeah. Actually, I'm wrong. It has airbags. I'm wrong about that.
Okay.
My car was the first year with airbags, but no anti-lock brakes. Why would you want those?
What would you need them for?
Exactly.
Like you're planning on stopping anytime soon.
Yeah. So I can tell you that the red line is 6,000 RPM, and the car guys will appreciate this. I've been on I-75 headed north where the speed limit's 75, but you can do 85 as long as you don't do it in your West Branch. And the car will do 85 miles an hour at about 1,200 RPM. Just barely jogging.
Wow. I often thought about you. There's a series of shows on the History Channel called The Cars That Built America.
Oh, yeah.
And it's basically about the big 3 automakers. And you could see by the time they got to the 1960s and 70s, there were these disgruntled car executives who were really car guys who wanted to make cars like the Viper, if nothing more just for fun. But they had to do responsible stuff. They had to build minivans with airbags, and they had to build family cars because that's where the money is. They wanted to build those kind of cars, those Vipers, and they wanted to. There's a funny scene where it's John DeLorean, the guy who these are all actors who are playing these car guys. John DeLorean is getting ready to test out. I want to say it was like the GTO or something like that. This is like
GTO is John DeLorean, exactly.
Yeah, 1968 or something like that. So he's getting ready by a couple of warehouses in Detroit to drag race some kids with this GTO. John DeLorean, and all of a sudden, out of a car wearing a suit and smoking a cigar is Lee Iacocca coming out to have a conversation with John DeLorean about the GTO. And I'm thinking, and of course he looks like he should be a character from an Archie comic book. He doesn't look, Lee Iacocca. I mean, he's wearing a 3-piece suit, smoking a cigar, getting out to talk to, because these kids, because that's really what happens. These car guys would hang out with a bunch of teenagers and drag race in the streets of Detroit. And that's where they would do all their product testing for these muscle cars that they wanted to build. But I saw that and I thought, I wonder how realistic that really was.
Well, that scene I'm not sure about, but I do know that John DeLorean was a guy who understood that there was a youth market out there.
Oh, yeah.
And it wasn't necessarily that the kids could afford to buy the cars, But he recognized that a lot of guys who were a little bit older wanted to buy hot rods and faster cars, and nobody was building them that would feed that market. And so he basically said, guys, let's shoehorn the biggest engine we've got into a Bonneville, and we'll call it a GTO. And when he pitched that to the bigwigs at General Motors and Pontiac, they're like, what are you, stupid? And he's like, no, it'll sell. And turns out they sold like hotcakes. And, it takes somebody to think outside the box. The same thing with Lee Iacocca and the Ford Mustang.
Yep.
The Ford Mustang was basically them going, hey, look, we can take a car like the Ford Falcon, which is kind of an ugly little car, and just put a better looking body on it and sell them cheap. And it might, the entry level Mustang was not terribly fast.
No.
But it looked nice.
Yep.
And he realized that there were people out there who would buy a good looking car, even if it was a little smaller, cheaper car, but it looked good.
Well,
and they sold.
And they said that the Mustang originally, the tagline was the new Italian import from Detroit, because that's what it was. It's supposed to look like a fancy schmancy sports car, even though it really wasn't much of a sports car, all things considered. It looked good. It wasn't super fast or anything like that.
Yeah, and so when Bob Lutz said, hey, look, we're willing to sell the Viper if people will buy them, they recognized that they'd sell, maybe 500, maybe 1,000 of those a year, but it made people think, instead of thinking about, just Chrysler makes minivans, they go, yeah, but they also make the Viper.
Yep.
And it became a prestige thing for them. It really did.
And then you got into the Hemi engines, and of course you got into all of that. And again, and that's, and this goes back to what we were originally talking about at the very beginning of the show about your brand and branding yourself and brand loyalty, that people will go, you know what? These are the people that sell the Hemi and they sell the Viper. If I have to buy a minivan, I probably would buy it from them because they're kind of cool with all this other stuff too. And I think marketers get that kind of stuff maybe more so now than they did 20 or 30 years ago, but they still get it.
Yeah, and there is something about the fact that if you grew up in Detroit in particular and you had a Chevy in high school, there's a good chance 30 years later you're still driving a Chevy.
Yep.
You may have upgraded models, you may have upgraded years, but there is that kind of brand loyalty. People are very, very fond of the first good car they ever owned.
Well, and you know what? And it even goes family-wise. My dad worked for General Motors for 30 years, and my first 6 cars were Chevys for that very reason. So, Steve Lehto from Lehto's Law is here. We've got to take a break, and we'll have one last segment of the show. We'll wrap things up with Steve Lehto. Coming back on the Todd L. Levitt Law Show. We'll be right back.
I met her in a club down in Old Soho, where you drink champagne and it tastes like Coca-Cola, C-O-L-A Cola. She walked up to me and she asked me to dance. I asked her her name, and in a dark brown voice she said Lola, L-O-L-A Lola, la 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 Lola. Well, I'm not the world's most physical guy, but when she squeezed me tight, she nearly broke my spine. Oh my Lola, la 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 Lola. Well, I'm not dumb, but I can't understand why she walked like a woman but talked like a man. Oh my Lola, la 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 Lola, la 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 Lola.
Welcome back to the Todd L. Levitt Law Show. Sans Todd, who is paddling around the UP. I do think I just saw a carrier pigeon fly over top the radio station, and I think it missed, but it did have a note from Todd saying help. I don't know what that means, but let's hope we get Todd back next week. The chuckling you're hearing in the background, that is the king, Steve Lehto from Lehto's Law, who's been filling in for Todd all this week. Tell everybody how they can get a hold of you if they need your services or want to find out more about Steve Lehto.
Well, it's good to be here. My website's lehtoslaw.com, LEHTOSLAW.com. But the easiest way to find me is simply to Google my name, Steve Lehto, L-E-H-T-O. It's 5 letters, L-E-H-T-O. Steve Lehto. If you Google me, you'll find me. I've got a YouTube channel, but I've got a website. But you'll see me, you'll get sick of me, but that's how you find me.
One of the most interesting videos that I've seen on your YouTube channel has to do with the new foreclosure law. Explain that.
Well, Michigan is one of the few states in the country where if you got behind in your property taxes and they foreclosed on your property, the municipality would auction your property off and then take the proceeds to pay the back taxes, and then they would pocket the rest of the money. So you would lose everything.
Well, that doesn't seem right.
It doesn't seem right. And so what happened was they've been doing this for years. Some counties do it more aggressively than others. And so a guy who lost his property in Oakland County, I believe it was, filed a lawsuit and said this is not right. It went all the way to the Michigan Supreme Court, and the Michigan Supreme Court agreed and said this is not right. This is unconstitutional. They struck the law down.
Wow.
So that guy actually got his money back. But here's the thing. If anybody who hears this program had that happen to them, and it's very possible because it was statewide, if it happened to you in the last 6 years, you need to talk to an attorney because you can probably sue and get your money back. Because right now, it's what people are doing. We're hearing from people who said, I got a couple $1,000s behind my taxes. I couldn't pay them. They foreclosed on my house. They kicked me out, and they kept all the money. Well, the money they kept, you can now get that back.
Wow, that's crazy. I would have.
Yeah.
That seems. You would think that somebody before it got all the way to the Michigan Supreme Court would have said, something about that seems a little strange.
Well, they argued that if you didn't pay your taxes, you were abandoning your property. And there were examples of people, for instance, who had Alzheimer's, who didn't understand what was happening. There were examples of people where they sent the notices to the wrong address, and they still lost their properties. There were examples of people who owned several pieces of property, and they'd send the notices to an abandoned or empty piece of property, but the person never got the notices. And so just because there's no one living there doesn't mean they don't want to keep the property. And there were examples of people who, for instance, who paid their taxes every single year, but 1 year they were short, but the next year they paid the correct amount, not knowing there was a shortage from the year before. And the municipality, you would think, let's apply some of this money to last year and some to this year. No.
Yeah.
They'd actually apply it all to this year and say, but you're still in arrears for last year. And so it was really crazy, but they were doing that on purpose because they wanted to make the money. That's the scary part, is it incentivized municipalities to foreclose on people because not only did they get the taxes paid, but they got a windfall from all the extra money, the surplus.
Well, yeah, because if you, let's say, had a property that was worth, $500,000-$600,000 or a house or something like that, you pay the taxes on it. That's $40,000 or $50,000. You sell it and you still get even a percentage of that. That's pretty good money.
Yeah, and that surplus this is the weird part. In most settings, when something gets auctioned off because you owe money, the surplus goes back to the person who owned the thing. So
right.
If you buy a car, for instance, from Ford Motor Credit, and you miss your payments, and they have to repossess the vehicle, they take it to an auction, they sell it at auction, they pay themselves, and if there's money left over, it goes back to you. And, it makes sense. So many people were shocked when they heard this, that, wait, the law lets them do what? But it turns out that there are some counties, like Oakland County, for instance, down near Detroit, they were making so much money doing this that they're actually concerned about how they're going to fund their operations next year without this source of money. That's how important it was. They were making that much money by taking people to, foreclosure and then keeping all the money.
And I'll say this much to that: boo-hoo on them. They can figure it out because, as we know, we're in a rental and foreclosure crisis waiting to happen with everything that's going on in the country right now. So it's possible that this is going to be even a bigger deal come next year.
Yeah, but the biggest news here is that if you were in one of these situations where 3, 4, 5 years ago, you lost something because of back taxes and never got that surplus, you can actually now go back, file a lawsuit, and get it. And that's the thing, is a lot of people wrote this off and just moved on with their lives. And you know something? If you do that now, you're leaving money on the table.
989-772-6000. If you think you have a situation like this, give Todd a call. He'll be able to possibly refer you to another attorney that handles this kind of case.
Yeah.
And it might end up being a big deal. Or you can give Steve Lehto a call, and your number is, Steve?
Well, my office number is 248-546-6626, but all my contact information is on my website. And just so people are clear on this, I don't handle these cases.
Right.
I don't. But I know people who do. And I will get you to somebody who will take care of you. So it's not like I'm trying to drum up business for myself here.
Sure.
I will send you to somebody who will handle these cases. I know Todd does the same thing.
Yep.
Someone calls Todd with a case that he can't handle it. He'll find you somebody who can.
Well, and of course, anytime he gets a lemon law case or anything like that, he sends them right to you because you're the best at that. So that's
a lot of people call me and say, "Hey, Steve, Todd told me to call you." I'm like, "Hey, how's Todd doing?" Well, he's out on the kayak right now.
Yeah, he's out paddling around the UP. He can't be bothered to be on his own show. But other than that, we do have to get going. The Todd L. Levitt Law Show will be back next week. Steve Lehto, thank you very much for co-hosting and guesting for Todd. Again, people want to find you on YouTube or anywhere else. How do they find you?
Just Google my name, Steve Lehto, Lehto. You'll find my website, lehtoslaw.com, or go to Google, look up Steve Lehto there. That's the name of my channel. It's actually Steve Lehto. The show is called Lehto's Law, but trust me, look for me, you'll find me. I'm there.
Steve, we've got to get going. The show is over.
Thanks a lot, guys.
We're not here for a long time. We're here for a good time. Todd will be back next week. Have a great week. We'll see you.
Todd L. Levitt Law Show, brought to you by Chad Malley Well Drilling of Rosebush, Clark Modular Homes, your most experienced and trusted builder in Mount Pleasant, and attorney Todd L. Levitt, not just a litigator, he's an advocator.
Opinions expressed on this radio program do not necessarily reflect the views of this radio station.